Welcome to Fantasy Football Today. Tonight, Express. I'm Heath Cummings. He's Dave Richard. We answered 4 million questions this morning on YouTube. Now we're going to tell you what actually happened. Dave, how was your week 15?
Good and bad. The big question on our live stream this morning was, who would you rather start, Tua Tagovailoa or Jared Goff? And the poll was close, but the results were not close. Jared Goff, 42 fantasy points, 446 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. Just an awesome game against Buffalo. Buffalo's defense has been ripped up now, 2 straight games. But as good as that game was for Jared Goff, there were 2 other quarterbacks who had more fantasy points and 1 receiver who had as many fantasy points as Goff did. And I think that's kind of the headline for week 15 is that there were just some bombastic performances from players who fantasy managers have come to know and trust and love for years and years.
So no bombastic performances from Tua Tagovailoa, who had 3 interceptions and 1 touchdown, from Tyreek Hill, who had 2 catches for 36 yards, from Jalen Waddle, who gave us a goose egg.
Well, Dave, he got hurt, and so that's part of the problem for Waddle is he didn't even play half the game.
The Dolphins are at home against San Francisco next week. Generally, we like them at home. Is there any chance you have any faith in Tua or Tyreek?
I'd like to know how healthy the 49ers defense is first and foremost, but I think we've seen a pretty serious track record here of when Tua's pressured, Tyreek just doesn't get the ball downfield, and that's a problem for him. I ended up moving him down. I don't know why I didn't move Tua down even further than I did, but I moved Tyreek down to like the lowest rung of a number 2 wide receiver that I could make him this week. Did that on Sunday morning, and honestly, I should have gone even lower. Like, it's just so bad how Tua's got to get the ball out quick. It's great for Jonnu. It's not bad for Achane, but it's terrible for Tyreek Hill, and I don't think losing Waddle will make a difference. And the Niners, they're a good pass rush team that plays a lot of zone. I think you might be able to find it inside your brain to sit Tyreek Hill in week 16, depending on who else you have.
You mentioned that Jalen Waddle got hurt. Nick Chubb also got hurt. You had Jerome Ford as one of your winners. He broke off a 62-yard touchdown run, finished with 104 yards from scrimmage, 18 PPR fantasy points. If Nick Chubb is out next week, is Jerome Ford a must start?
Nick Chubb's going to be out next week. He has a broken foot. So, yes, Jerome Ford is basically going to be a must start. He plays at Cincinnati in week 16. I don't know about week 17 against the Dolphins, but let's just take it 1 week at a time with Jerome Ford. Should be the main running back. And it could be a very different looking Browns offense. They did bench Jameis, who had a terrible game. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson came in, and the offense was okay with DTR. If they start him to mop up the season, I think the offense changes quite a bit. I don't think it's particularly a good thing, but it gives them a chance to develop a quarterback, and maybe it does give some opportunities for Jerome Ford, and that's really what it's all about. He's getting opportunities.
On the other side of that game, you had the Chiefs offense as a loser, presumably because Patrick Mahomes suffered what we believe is a high ankle sprain. It's not a broken ankle. We've seen him play through high ankle sprains in the past. But either way, this is a downgrade, or only if Carson Wentz is the starter?
It's really more so about Carson Wentz being the starter, but it's another week where it's a disappointing result for Isaiah Pacheco. The run game in general, I did think Kareem Hunt early on did look pretty good, but he's splitting reps with Pacheco, and Samaje Perine is still playing on passing down. So they're using 3 guys instead of 2. I just don't know if it's going to happen for Pacheco, despite a couple of tough runs that he had. He had a couple of those runs where he had that energy to him that we like to see. And then the passing game, DeAndre Hopkins really didn't do a whole lot. I don't think Kelsey did a ton in his homecoming game.
Great day for Xavier Worthy. He had a team high 11 targets.
And they tried to get him going a little bit in the second half. And in doing so, he had the nice touchdown, but they kind of left the door open a little bit because he was making mistakes. Worthy was making mistakes, and it kind of left the door open a little bit for Cleveland to possibly get back into the game. There was a point in the second half and maybe it bled into the first half, Mahomes had 8 straight incompletions. So the offense isn't exactly where it wants to be. The offensive line, you would know this, isn't where the Chiefs want it to be. And now Patrick Mahomes might be on the shelf. Remember, this was the first of 3 games that they're going to play in like 11 days. It's crazy what the schedule is moving forward for the Kansas City Chiefs.
So we did have a question in the chat. Jay asked, if Mahomes is out, does Houston become the #1 defense next week? And I think you're forgetting, like, I know we made a lot of jokes about Adam calling Carson Wentz an elite quarterback and about Carson Wentz being a bad starting quarterback, but Carson Wentz is still like the cream of the crop when it comes to backup quarterbacks in the NFL. Houston will be a start if Mahomes is out, probably not the #1 defense, not with Andy Reid calling plays. We'll take a short break. We'll get to a couple of my winners and losers from week 15. Okay, Dave. Davante Adams, holy cow. In the first half of Jets and Jack, and I talked about it this morning. Like, I was heavily invested in Aaron Rodgers, Breece Hall, Davante Adams, and Garrett Wilson today. And in the first half, it looked awful. Adams had 0 fantasy points.
Yes.
And then he all of a sudden, like Back to the Future, turns into Davante Adams from 5 years ago, has one of the greatest halves, it has to be, of his career. Finishes the game with 9 catches for 100. I believe he had 2 targets and no catches in the first half. If that's accurate, and I think it is,
I'll check it right
he
now.
caught 9 of 10 targets in the second half for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. Do we take anything from this other than LOL Jacksonville?
It's definitely a lot of LOL Jacksonville, but are you really surprised that this is how Aaron Rodgers is operating? These games mean nothing. He knows it, and he's just going to take control of this offense, and he's going to throw 30 times, and he's going to throw to his best buddy 12 of the 30 times. And in the second half, he was really unstoppable, had an octopus in the second half. That's when you score a touchdown, and then you get a 2-point conversion on the very next play. That was very cool. And definitely a turn back the clock game for Rodgers and for Davante Adams, who had as many fantasy points in PPR as Jared Goff did. Cool to see. Do I really believe that they're going to be good next week against the Rams? Maybe. It's the matchup against Buffalo, and I shouldn't say no to that too. There might be a great finish for Rodgers and Adams and Garrett Wilson here. Like I said at the beginning of this very podcast, Buffalo's pass defense has been crushed the last 2 weeks.
Jake Ferguson was supposed to be like the steal of the streamers, a starting tight end that comes back off of injury, somehow available in half of leagues, gets to face the Panthers in week 15, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 16. It was going to be so great. And Jake Ferguson had 2 catches for 23 yards on 4 targets in a game where Cooper Rush threw 3 touchdown passes and scored 24 fantasy points.
Nuts.
Jake Ferguson against Tampa Bay next week. Like, we're looking anywhere else, right?
I think so. I want to trust Jake Ferguson, but the fact that we saw a great game from Cooper Rush without him having to lean heavily on Jake Ferguson. And the truth is, he the only guy he leaned heavily on was CeeDee Lamb.
It's a good choice.
13 of 29 targets. So as long as he's getting his numbers and it's going to get spread out amongst everybody else, I don't see how you could feel good about Jake Ferguson.
I don't know how Dallas goes through these stretches every season where CeeDee Lamb sees like 5 or 6 targets in a game, and then they remember, oh, you know what? If we threw it to one of the best wide receivers in football 15 times a game, we would score touchdowns. I'm Heath. He's Dave. That's FFT Express. We're heading over to the big show. Come join us there.